XMIL sent church bullies after my kids. I exposed everything. I'm Mark, 46, and I'm raising two girls, Emily and Chloe, who are 17 and 15. Their relationship with Ryan's parents, Walter and Irene, has been rocky for years, and losing their dad last year in an accident didn't soften anything. Ryan's death pulled the lid off everything he'd been hiding, and grief mixed with betrayal in ways that still make my stomach knot. While he was married to me, Ryan cheated with another woman, and two little boys were born from that affair. She died too, which left those kids orphaned in the worst, messiest way imaginable. After the funeral, Walter and Irene latched onto our household like we were a life raft they owned by birthright. They insisted my daughters should move in with them, and in the next breath demanded to move in with us because family stays together. The audacity made my jaw clench. We're already in court over their attempt to take custody of my girls, and I'll say this plain. That second request, moving in here, will never happen, not in this lifetime. Emily and Chloe need peace and therapy, not a new command center in their living room. I keep records, I take notes, and I make sure the truth doesn't get steamrolled by nostalgia. Our world shrank to school, work, counseling, and the small rituals that help a family keep breathing. Ryan's choices left ripples we didn't ask for, and I'm the one who has to calm the water. I thought time might dull the drama. I thought everyone would settle into new roles. I was wrong in a way I could feel in my bones. It turns out, some people only get louder when the facts don't favor them. I learned how loud they could get the day of a birthday. Saturdays in our town come with a farmer's market that smells like tomatoes, warm bread, and the kind of eggs you can't buy in a carton. This one fell on Chloe's birthday week, and since her actual party is later in the month, I figured we'd make a little adventure out of it. I handed her a budget and said, "Birthday rule today. Get what makes you smile." And I meant it. She lit up and took off with a tote bag, already scheming about chocolate and anything dipped in sugar. Emily and I walked the stalls at an easy pace, sampling jam here, checking out cheese there, and keeping an eye on the time without being weird about it. After about an hour, my dad's radar started buzzing. I was reaching for my phone when Chloe called first. Her voice was thin and wet with tears, and she said, "Dad, some weird ladies won't let me leave." My heart did that heavy drop like an elevator cable snapped. We followed her directions fast, cutting through a row of honey vendors and handmade soap until we saw Chloe pressed back against a table of baked goods. Surrounding her were 6 older women, faces stern like Sunday school being weaponized. They were scolding her about how unchristian it was to avoid her grandparents and how a good big sister should be there for those poor orphaned baby brothers. My daughters are the ones who discovered Ryan's cheating and the babies. Their therapist has a word for that, but to me it's just pain with homework. I moved in front of Chloe and put Emily to work with a plan. "Pay for what your sister has," I said quietly, "and head to the car." Then I turned toward the circle of church ladies and let my mouth do what my spine demanded. They came at me with scripture. I answered with boundaries and a spine. A couple of those women I recognized from years back when we used to attend Walter and Irene's church on holidays to keep the peace. Today, they didn't come to talk. They came to scold. One said I was raising rebellious girls. Another said I owed obedience to my ex-in-laws, like a good Christian spouse. And a third tried to shame Chloe for not wanting to mother her father's affair sons. Hearing that word mother pointed at my teenage daughter lit something in me that didn't feel polite. I kept my voice low but firm. "We don't owe access to people who cause harm," I said, and I meant every syllable. Emily slipped money to the vendor, gathered Chloe's sweets, and moved like a pro toward the exit. The women didn't stop. They accused me of poisoning the girls against family, and even tossed out that I was breaking God's order by denying Walter and Irene. I told them God could handle my house rules just fine without a committee vote. What started as scolding turned into a full-on scene. Other shoppers stared. Vendors frowned. One security volunteer radioed for help. Voices rose, hands pointed, and unchristian got thrown around like confetti at a parade no one asked to march in. A market manager stepped between us and told everyone to leave. I collected Chloe, met Emily by the car, and we walked away with the women following behind like a flock of noisy birds. Inside the car, doors locked, I watched them in the mirror, circling like vultures that smelled a story. I started the engine and drove off slow, not letting their energy steer mine. Back home, we went quiet, like people do after a near miss on the highway. I made tea. The girls curled into their corners. Fear thins out into tired when your nervous system finally gets a vote. Later that night, when the house settled, I opened my laptop and reached out to an old contact from that church. What Tom told me next made my hands shake with anger. Tom isn't a close friend, but he's decent, plugged in, and not one of the extremists who jump on any rumor if it stings the right target. I told him what happened at the market, every ugly line, and he apologized even though he had nothing to do with it. Then he said, "Mark, I think I know why they were amped up," and walked me through the digital wildfire I'd missed. Walter and Irene had spun up a massive post inside the church's private Facebook group. According to their version, Emily and Chloe had abandoned their grandparents, and I was a heartless ex who left the elderly, homeless, and penniless. They wrote it like a soap opera with holy lighting, and the comments section turned into a pep rally. The part that hit me hardest was the lie about the money. They inherited Ryan's personal bank account and his life insurance, but the post framed them as victims I had left to starve. Then came the dagger. They told everyone my daughters were the reason their grandmother lost her grandsons, implying Emily and Chloe somehow blocked custody of the two orphan boys. In reality, those boys went to relatives on Ryan's side who were more stable and more appropriate, which is exactly what the court decided. But to whip up outrage, Irene wrote like we'd thrown babies into a snowbank and cheered. Here's the twist no one outside that church would guess. For all their noise about politics and who's allowed to love whom, that congregation is absolutely rigid about cheating. Male or female, doesn't matter. Adultery is their red line. So how did Walter and Irene talk about extra children without outing Ryan's affair? They got creative in the dirtiest, laziest way. Irene claimed the other woman was our surrogate because I couldn't have more children, and she said I rejected the babies for being boys. That accusation sat in me like a stone I couldn't swallow. I decided to pull every record I had and make the truth loud. Because Ryan died while our divorce was still in motion, my attorney had compiled a tidy archive that documented why I filed in the first place. That detail matters. Since the divorce never reached a final decree, I wasn't bound by certain restrictions about sharing evidence that pertained to my own defense. That meant I could answer lies with receipts without stepping into legal mud. I confirmed that with a quick call and a reread of my notes. I took the next day off and drove to a print shop with a flash drive full of everything I'd hoped never to need. I ordered high-quality prints of the photos that showed Ryan cheating, his message threads with the woman he slept with, and the text exchanges where Walter and Irene acknowledged the affair and offered him cover. I added screenshots of their harassing messages to me during the divorce, demanding I put family first, while they excused his mess. Then I pulled the worst of it. The messages where they bullied my daughters about their baby brothers, even calling Emily and Chloe bastards 2 days after Ryan died, as if pain loves company. The clerk handed me a thick, glossy stack that felt like bricks. On my way home, I bought a set of slim binders and a box of those sheet protectors people use for hymn packets. I spent hours at the kitchen table building what I can only call truth kits. The cover page showed Ryan and the affair partner kissing on our couch. Faces clear, no ambiguity, not a cousin, not a distant friend. Under the title, Ryan and her name, an honest timeline. Inside, I placed dates, messages, and a simple caption on each page so even a casual skim would get the point. When the binders were done, I walked them into the church before Sunday service. There's a table in the back where folks borrow songbooks, and nobody checks what's tucked among them. I slid the binders in, neat as a row of hymnals, said nothing to anyone, and left before the organist finished warming up. By afternoon, the gossip machine was chewing its own tail in public. Word spread faster than I expected, and the tone changed like a storm flipping the barometer. The Facebook group went from praise to whiplash in about an hour. People who had called my daughters ungrateful were now asking how long the grandparents had known about the affair. Names started flying, ugly ones I won't repeat here, and the pastor stepped in to warn folks to keep it PG-13. It didn't help much. The comments were already hot enough to cook an egg. A lot of members apologized to Emily and Chloe by proxy, tagging me or sending direct messages that said, "We didn't know," which was honest and also beside the point. The part that made me laugh, in that dry, tired way you laugh when a headache finally breaks. Was the chorus insisting I was still wrong for wanting a divorce, but maybe the shock of betrayal had led me astray, and one day I might come back to the light. Meanwhile, Ryan was cemented as the bad actor, and the woman he cheated with got labeled everything you'd expect when folks run out of charity. 2 handwritten letters showed up in our mailbox addressed to my girls, apologizing for the market ambush. One envelope included an invite for us to attend church for support, which I set aside like a hot pan. Support is lovely when it isn't a leash. I told the girls they didn't owe anyone a conversation. We kept our therapist appointments, ate dinner at home, and breathed like normal people whose feet were on their own floors. As for Walter and Irene, they took a blow they didn't see coming. Their son was no longer the golden boy of testimony time. He was a lesson in consequences, and their role in enabling him wasn't playing well in the pews. Pride hates fluorescent lights, and churches, for all their flaws, have a lot of bright bulbs. Then Irene posted a public pity screed that twisted the knife again. Irene moved from the church group to her own page and wrote a long complaint about being alienated and discarded by a cold generation. She wished her great son were still alive because he would take care of his parents like a real man, which made me bark out a humorless laugh at the kitchen sink. With what money exactly? For years, I was the one paying most of the bills while Ryan booked miracles on credit. She wrote about the cruelty of modern families and how the elderly have no place anymore, omitting any mention of the lie she told about a surrogate and the boys I rejected for being male. Meanwhile, Tom messaged me the thread counts and confirmed the pastor had personally asked her to retract certain claims. She did not. She doubled down and framed the evidence binders as hate, which is convenient when facts don't kneel. People argued in circles. Some wanted us all back in the fold, singing, arms linked, pretending none of this ever happened. Others were furious on my daughter's behalf and wanted Walter and Irene banned outright. I didn't weigh in because I've learned that winning an argument on the internet still feels like losing a day you could have lived. Instead, I kept my focus on Emily and Chloe, schoolwork, rides, and which movie would let their brains relax without sugarcoating reality. The dust was still flying when Walter and Irene made a final choice. They didn't apologize. They didn't correct the record. They packed up their church friendship and took it elsewhere, leaving a hole where their reputation used to sit. I can't say I celebrated. I just exhaled and took the girls for ice cream. The only thing left was to explain the will before rumors rewrote that too. Money talk isn't pretty, but if you don't bring it into daylight, it grows mold. Ryan had a will, and somewhere between his promises and his paperwork, he made a choice I didn't know about. He told me he had named Emily and Chloe as beneficiaries, and I believed him because I wanted to, because marriage trains you to assume the best until you trip over the worst. The document said something different. Walter and Irene were beneficiaries. I didn't fight to put myself on that line. My own will names my daughters and no one else, and that's how I sleep at night. But I want the record clear. I never pushed to profit from Ryan's death. I pushed to keep my girls safe, which includes being honest about where the money went. The life insurance and his personal accounts went to Walter and Irene, and that's a matter of paper, not opinion. The irony isn't lost on me that the same people claiming I left them penniless are the ones cashing checks they didn't earn. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it to keep the floor steady beneath my daughter's feet. When Chloe asks, "Did Grandpa really say we're to blame?" I can pull a message, point to the sentence, and say, "This happened, and it was wrong, and it wasn't your fault." Truth doesn't cure grief, but it lets you walk without looking over your shoulder every second. And just when I thought we had calm, court dates started inching closer. The custody push from Walter and Irene isn't a rumor. It's a real case number on a real docket with a real judge who has no patience for theatrics. Their attorney argues that grandparent involvement is healthy and that my daughters need stability, which sounds noble until you see the texts where those same grandparents called my girls names I won't repeat. My counsel keeps reminding me to trust the process, and I do, but I also collect what the process needs to see. We organized a clean binder for court. Nothing extra, nothing dramatic, just dates, therapy recommendations, school records, and the messages that show the pattern. Emily hates the way her stomach flips every time she hears a notification ding. Chloe plugs in a string of fairy lights when the living room gets too gray. My job is to keep our home boring and predictable. Boring is heaven after chaos. People sometimes ask why I didn't just let the grandparents visit with strict supervision. The answer is, we tried soft boundaries before, and they treated those like suggestions, not rules. If a person can't stop themselves from weaponizing religion at a farmer's market, I don't hand them more opportunities in my kitchen. That line may sound harsh, but it's how I keep the temperature low enough for healing. We'll show up in court the way we show up at the therapist's office. On time, prepared, and uninterested in a fight that doesn't fix anything. There's a difference between forgiveness and access. One is a hard choice. The other is a safety plan. We're not mixing them anymore. Right before our next filing, I got a message that changed the tone. A manila envelope slid through my mail slot with no return address. And inside it was a neatly printed apology from one of the women who confronted Chloe at the market. She wrote that she'd believed Irene's Facebook post because it fit what she wanted to be true about loyalty and family. Then she said she'd seen the binder, recognized the living room in the photo, and realized she'd been cheering for a story that wasn't real. She asked for forgiveness and promised she'd speak up if the church rumor mill spun us again. I read it twice and set it on the counter, unsure what to feel. Relief is strange when you've been braced for a punch for months. I didn't know this woman personally, but I wrote back anyway with a short note. Thank you for checking facts and for not cornering kids. That's a low bar, but some days that's the only bar that matters. Emily stuck the note on the fridge like a medal from a race we didn't sign up for. Chloe drew a tiny smiley face in the corner. We don't live for validation from strangers, but it's human to appreciate some decency in a room that's been mean. I took the girls to the market the next Saturday, and we stuck to the side streets and bought strawberries and came home before the crowd got noisy. It felt like muscles unclenching after a long run. Then Tom called, and his voice told me we weren't done yet. Tom isn't dramatic, so when he opened with, "You should know what's brewing," I leaned on the counter and listened. He said a small group in the church had started pushing a new angle, that my binders were revenge, and that airing dirty laundry was worse than the sin that caused it. It's a clever pivot if your goal is to protect a narrative at the expense of the truth. He warned me I might see renewed posts with soft language and sharp edges. I thanked him and told him I wouldn't reply online. He agreed. Let your evidence do what it does, he said, and keep living your life. I hung up and stared at the stack of normal things on our table, bills, homework, a coupon for pizza, and I decided we'd keep doing ordinary on purpose. That evening we ate spaghetti and argued about which movie villain is weirdly sympathetic, and for a while it felt like any other house on the block. I'm not naive, but I'm not letting strangers rent space in my head for free, either. If there's a lesson here, it's that boundaries make enemies of people who used to benefit from your lack of them. I can live with that. My daughters can too. Still, I save Tom's voicemail in case I need to replay his calm when mine runs low. The court clerk's email landed the next morning with our hearing date. Our hearing date slotted into the calendar like a thumbtack through a map, neat and unavoidable. My attorney met me with a checklist and a tone that said, "We'll walk, not sprint." We prepped the basics, custody, contact, communication, and left the drama in the hall where it belongs. Focus on the girl's needs, she repeated, and I repeated it back to myself in the car like a cadence. Emily practiced answering simple questions without apologizing for existing, and Chloe rehearsed saying, "I don't feel safe with them," without shrinking herself to fit anyone's comfort. Therapy has been doing its quiet work, and I see it in the way their shoulders sit a little lower when they talk about the future. They are not props in anyone's moral lesson. They are kids who deserve boring Tuesdays and soft blankets and the right to choose who gets a key to their lives. Walter and Irene filed statements heavy on sentiment and light on ownership. I didn't read them twice. There's a kind of grief that makes people control everything they can reach because they can't reach the one thing they want most. I understand that. I still won't hand them the steering wheel. The night before the hearing, we ate takeout and watched a comedy and went to bed early because rest is strategy too. And in the morning, something unexpected happened before we left the driveway. A single white envelope sat on the windshield under the wiper, weighted by a small river stone. I slid it free and opened it right there in the driveway. Inside was a short letter from Walter. He wrote that he never wanted things to go this way. And then he pivoted into a plea about family unity and the last years of our lives. It wasn't an apology, it was a request for access wrapped in nostalgia. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket, not angry, just steady. The part of me that remembers birthdays and casseroles wanted to find a gentle yes. The father in me, who'd watched his daughters get cornered by strangers, knew the only answer right now was no. If Walter wanted healing, he could start by owning what he'd said to two grieving teenagers and what he'd encouraged strangers to do to them. We drove to the courthouse in silence except for the turn signal and Emily's soft humming when she's nervous. The hallway smelled like paper and quiet decisions. Our attorney touched my elbow and said, "You're doing fine," which is a sentence I didn't know I needed until it landed. The judge read, asked, listened, and made notes without looking impatient. When it was our turn, we told the truth in plain sentences. The ruling wasn't final, but the judge's questions told me plenty. The judge focused on the girl's welfare like a laser, which is what the law asked of her and what my bones begged for. She asked about therapy, school, routine, and whether contact with Walter and Irene could happen in any form that wasn't harmful. My attorney suggested a cautious path, written communication channeled through counsel, no surprise visits, and absolutely no third-party outreach like the market incident. The judge nodded, wrote, and moved to the next point. When Walter's attorney tried to reframe the Facebook campaign as miscommunication, the judge paused and asked if calling minors bastards qualified as a miscommunication in their view. The silence in that room said more than any speech. I glanced at my daughters and saw both of them sit a little taller. Sometimes protection is just someone with a gavel saying, "Enough." We left without fireworks, no victory laps, no side-eyed comments, just a date for the next step and a list of conditions in the meantime. I drove us home through ordinary traffic and felt the strange relief that comes when you realize your house is exactly where you want to be. We made tacos, finished homework, and watered the plants. Boring never tasted so good. I thought that was the end, until Tom forwarded me one last thread. Tom's final message was a snapshot of a quieter church conversation, not the shout fest from before. Members were talking about boundaries, about not turning private pain into public theater, and about how confession without change is just content. No one mentioned our names, and I liked it that way. If you want to know how a story really ends, look for the absence of noise. Walter and Irene have stepped back from that congregation. Maybe they'll find a place that helps them grieve without blaming kids or inventing saints. My door isn't open today, but I'm not building a concrete wall either. I'm building a good life with my daughters, which in our house looks like early bedtimes, counseling appointments on the calendar, and laughter that doesn't have to apologize for existing. As for the will, the binders, the market, and the gossip, I didn't pick this fight, but I finished it the only way that let us sleep. Facts, not fireworks. Boundaries, not brawls. My daughters get to be kids in a home that isn't a courtroom or a pulpit, and that's what I'll defend every time, no matter who's asking. If you're walking through something similar, here's what helped me. Keep records, hold your line, and don't mistake volume for truth. The people who deserve a seat at your table will show up with gentleness and accountability, not demands and microphones. And if the noise starts again, I know exactly where the binders are.